Hello and welcome to the Learn New Testament Greek channel. This is level 3, chapter 2. We are now introducing the subjunctive mood. We have been looking at the basic form, indicative verbs, and here in level 3 we're going to be moving on to look at different sorts of moods of verbs and how verbs are used differently in the New Testament. Beginning with the subjunctive mood, which is used pretty commonly in the New Testament, certainly a lot more than it is used in English. Welcome to you, those of you who come here to learn about our God through His Word and to serve Him through that. Let us just start with a moment of reflection on this verse from Jeremiah 29. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I pray that the Lord blesses you in and through your service of and for Him, that you will find Him wherever you seek Him, whenever you need Him most. May you know Him in your heart ever more deeply and ever more closely through your studies and in all your life. Amen. We are not here merely for some dry academic exercise, but to come here in service of and to get to know our living, breathing, all-powerful, awe-inspiring Lord Jesus Christ, and to come to know Him more through studying His Word, which is alive and powerful. So let's delve into our topic for today and think about how subjunctives are used in the New Testament. Now, I found this acronym is a good way to remember what subjunctives do. Subjunctives are weird. They express wishes, emotions, impersonal expressions, recommendations, and doubts. When looking at subjunctives, 4 things you want to take into account: the tense, the voice, the person, as in whether it's first, second or third person, and the number, singular or plural, as we have done with other verbs in the indicative mode. Have a little think about what a subjunctive is in English. Many of us who speak English don't actually know our own grammar that well. I've taken this from a site called promover.com. It's really good for learning about your English grammar if you need to, which you may need to if you're studying Greek. There's some common phrases here on the left, words that we might use when translating the Koine Greek into English. It's important that. It's necessary that. I suggest that. The next one, I demand that. That's not true in Greek. We don't use the subjunctive. We don't see the subjunctive being used for such firm purposes. It's usually not demands, but suggestions and requests and mild exhortations. Moving on in the list, if only, if I were, unless, so that, or in case. These are the sorts of words that we might use when introducing a subjunctive. A subjunctive will lead us into a subordinate clause. It means you have a main clause and then a clause that is dependent or conditional upon it. It is in some way subordinate to it. Examples of the subjunctive mood being used in English, here on Promover: I insist that he arrive on time. If I had known, I would have left earlier. You see there how one thing leads to another, doing one thing in order to get an outcome. It's important that she be here for the meeting. They're expressing the importance of something. I suggest they not spend too much money. They're used to make a suggestion or a prohibition. We do see that sort of thing, suggestions and prohibitions in the Bible as well. And the last example there, I wish I were taller. The subjunctive can also be used to express wishes in Greek. I found another site called examplanning.com, which gives you a bit more of an idea of the subjunctive mood and how it's used in English. There's some relevant stuff here for studying New Testament Greek. New Testament Greek use of the subjunctive is not entirely the same as English, but it is pretty close. So in this first category, you can see there words used when we translate. The subjunctive in the New Testament might include some of these: ask, propose, demand, recommend, desire, request, insist, require, prefer, suggest, or urge. Most of those you would probably use in translating the Bible. One firmer things like demand, insist, or require, you probably wouldn't see that as a subjunctive. Such firm requests, demands would be expressed either through the imperative or possibly using the indicative and other words alongside them that would convey that meaning. The subjunctive is a softer form, and where there are instructions, it's mild exhortation. I'll come back to that point. It can be used passively alongside an infinitive. The example here, the course is to be completed by 2021. We see that sort of thing in the New Testament as well, with a future outcome in mind alongside a participle and the infinitive. That sort of thing does go on in the New Testament. We see belief and knowledge. Subjunctive mood is used to anticipate things. So the example here, it is believed that all men need love, and that sort of use is also around in the Bible. Bear in mind also whether we are talking about transitive or intransitive verbs. Intransitive verbs don't need an object. So a lion roars, a bird flies. It's not an action done to an object, like if I bang a drum. The word raise is used here as an example as a transitive verb. You could raise something up, whereas to rise is an intransitive and doesn't need an object there. It doesn't take a complement there. When we're looking at subjunctives, the form of the word, that is the morphology, the shape of it, to use a technical term, gives us the inflection. That basically means the details about what it is. So the shape of the word tells us what it is, what the details are. So from that we will get the tense. And here we have present, aorist and perfect in the New Testament. I think there's like one use in the future or something, but basically it doesn't exist. Then we have number and person. So first, second and third person, singular and plural, as we do in modern languages. And then the voices. We have active. Then we have, for the present and perfect, we have middle stroke passive, where you can't tell the difference. It's the same morphology. It's the same word ending. And with the aorist, we have a separate middle and passive. Now bear in mind, we have been seeing an epsilon augment at the beginning of verbs in the indicative mood. That always happened in past tenses, like the aorist and the imperfect. And the perfect tense had a reduplication of the first sound. When we move into the subjunctive mood, that epsilon augment doesn't happen. And in fact, actually, in all of the other moods, that epsilon augment in the past tense doesn't happen. That is only occurring in the indicative. So we will see that the structure, the ending of the word will change. If it's a second aorist, remember the stem is going to change, but we won't get the epsilon augment for past tenses. I am going to be moving fairly quickly through these slides, but do hit spacebar or click on pause if you want a bit more time. Now usually the subjunctive goes with another word. The two most common are e'an and hinna. E'an is a conditional particle and hinna is a subordinating conjunction. We will normally see one of those particles or conjunctions that tend to get used with the subjunctive. So that is one of the ways that you can spot that a subjunctive is going to occur. It's not true that it happens every single time. There are a few rules in Greek learning that don't have an exception, but generally speaking, you're going to get one of these common particles or subordinating conjunctions. Whilst those are definitely the most common two, sometimes used both at the same time, there are some others as well. E'an is a combination of a, epsilon iota, and an, alpha nu. In older texts, you will sometimes see those two in their original form, a, an. And in the Bible, the New Testament, we do sometimes see that. In the Septuagint, we see it quite a bit. But basically, by the time of Koine Greek, also called Hellenistic Greek, so sort of roughly 300 BC onwards, we see that that has combined to become e'an. Hinna, hotan, heos, and then either hos or an. These are all common particles and subordinating conjunctions that allow the opening of a subordinate clause. That is one that contains a subjunctive mood verb in it. So keep an eye out for these sorts of words. There's not really a really clear way of saying it is translated this way or that way. You can look them up with the general rules, but basically have a fairly open mind about the way that you translate them. You're going to have to look at the context and the whole sentence and find an English word that makes sense. But words like so that, in order that, but is another one that you might use. Indeed is sometimes used in English translations, and so on. Some of these indicate around time, some of them indicate around purpose, some of them are for expressing wishes or certain outcomes, and so on. We'll go through the roles of the subjunctive. As we translate those, bear in mind the purpose of the word that we are using and of the subordinating conjunction. Subjunctives express wishes, they make exhortations, they state dependent clauses and conditional sentences. To think of these types of constructs at a more conceptual level, perhaps you might think of it in this way, that the subjunctive expresses what is possible, what is probable, or is used to make mild command through that verb action. So here is a list of functions of the subjunctive. We have the general one that's used quite a bit, used to state something probable or possible in a general state. This is an alternative in Attic Greek to the optative, but by the time we get to the New Testament, the optative has become very rare and the subjunctive has become more popular. In a dependent clause, the subjunctive is normally preceded by e'an, or, as I said, that word, which used to be two words, might just be a and an, still separate. The outcome depends on something. It's a dependent clause. This one is the most common form of the subjunctive. Jesus died in order to save us for our sins, from our sins, for example. We get also independent clauses. The subjunctive may also be used to propose real or hypothetical questions in an independent clause. Another very common use of the subjunctive is for purpose and result. So we have the subjunctive of purpose and result. In this example, the subjunctive function is used to show a purpose or a result outcome within that clause, and in that case it will be preceded by hinner. So you know if hinner is being used that this subordinating clause is about purpose and result. We get the exhortative subjunctive. This will only occur in the first person plural. So, for example, we may do something. Let us go to Jerusalem, for example, is one of those in the New Testament. The subjunctive here can be used to exhort or give a mild instruction. We should maybe do this or that, or not do this or not do that. These are not imperative commands. Firm imperative commands will be dealt with in the imperative mood. The subjunctive is milder than that. However, the last category is prohibitive. The subjunctive can be used to prohibit something, to say that it cannot happen. Again, this is usually a fairly mild form of prohibition, rather than a very firm or rough statement. One more point on that, sometimes the exhortative subjunctive is called the hortatory subjunctive, and that's the same thing. Another thing to think about when we're translating or when we're analysing biblical text, the subjunctive is basically always thinking about the future. It is always happening so that something else can or will or might happen. So the aspect of it is future looking. It could be asking a question, will it happen as a result of something happening? But even if the verb is in the present tense or in a past tense, the aorist or perfect, the outcome is in the future. The only way that we can see expressed in Koine Greek an outcome before that would be as if a pluperfect then led to another past tense like an aorist or perfect. But when we're using the subjunctive, keep in mind that there is always a future sense or aspect to its outcome. These are conditional clauses where the outcome is dependent upon something else or in the condition of something else occurring. So on the screen here, these are both past tenses, but as we discussed, the outcomes, predicted outcomes, or the answers to the question happen next in the timeline and therefore have an aspect of the future about them. So what does it mean to use the aorist? Remember that, as we have said before, the aorist is once off and the perfect is about an ongoing and completed action. So whilst the pastness of these verbs, that's not really a word, but I'll use it anyway, the pastness of these verbs might be lost when considering their outcomes in a future sense of looking at them, they do continue to convey something different to a present tense subjunctive and to each other. Because the aorist is going to express a once-off event, the perfect is going to express a completed event, the present tense is continuous. The aorist is used quite a lot also as a once-off verb and can be used in the present tense as a present aorist to emphasize that something is once off in the present. Whilst the aorist is common, the perfect subjunctive certainly isn't. I mean, in fact, actually some textbooks omit it altogether. So I won't go in depth with the perfect subjunctive here, but I will mention that it exists. Let's think about how we form the subjunctive. We're going to see endings that look a lot like the active, middle and passive voices in the present tense and future tense verbs that we saw in the indicative. So for the active, what happens is that a vowel sound there is going to be elongated. So we use one of the long vowels, the eta, giving a long A sound, or the omega, giving a long O sound. Basically, the morphology of the verb ending will otherwise be the same as the present active indicative. The middle stroke passive again will be like the indicative, with the beginning of the stem lengthened into a long vowel. The passive, which is only in the aorist, again looks similar with an elongation, and will have a theta eta towards the end of the word in it. There is no separate endings for the passive in the perfect and present tenses. This only occurs in the aorist subjunctive. Let's look at how that works out. Lengthening the vowel. We're using the exemplar luo. I free, I loose, I set something free. Luo stays the same, can't lengthen the omega further. Luace, spelt with the epsilon iota sigma, sounds the same but becomes luace with an eta. That eta has an iota subscript, which shows us that a letter has been pushed out. So basically we've elongated the epsilon, but we're not going to put a long vowel followed by an iota, so that is going to be pushed down underneath. Similarly, lu-a becomes lu-a. They sound the same, but we are swapping the diphthong epsilon iota for an eta with an iota subscript. We don't pronounce the iota subscript, but it is there to show us that that letter was there. Here on the screen I've highlighted the diphthong where that is pushed out. In Greek we wouldn't join an iota onto an eta in that way, so eta plus iota, I wouldn't say it never happens, but it would be rare, it would be unusual in Greek to do it and have those two alongside each other. So the iota is pushed underneath, otherwise we would end up with three vowels in, three or possibly four vowels in a row as well. So that iota is pushed down and not pronounced. The plural is a little bit easier. Luomen becomes luomen. Lueta becomes lueta. Luusin becomes luosin. So pretty simple. There's just a little small change where we see that omega or eta at the end of the stem and the beginning of the verb's ending. Think subjunctive. That's a very common thing to see, and one of the quickest ways to spot that a subjunctive is happening. Noting also if you've got something like hina, hotan, e'an, one of those other particles or conjunctions. Then when we move into the middle stroke passive voice, lu-omai becomes lu-omai. Lu-a stays the same. So you're going to have to look for other clues with that one in order to parse it. I mean, most of you will just be using Bible Hub or Step Bible or Blue Letter Bible, something like that, and the parsing is done for you. But if you're doing the parsing, do note that there are some that stay the same, so you need to look for the other clues to work out that a subjunctive is in play. Luetai becomes luetai. In the plural, luometha becomes luometha. Luesther becomes luesther. Luontai becomes luontai. I'm emphasizing the long vowels there, but actually the emphasis is going to go where the accent is when you say those. Thinking also, as I was just saying, about looking for the other clues. When we're going to look for a subjunctive, we know that it's a subordinate clause. We know that it is usually a dependent clause as well. So the clause that it goes with, there'll be some sort of conditional dependency between those two clauses and keeping your eye out for the particle or subordinating conjunction that normally goes with the subjunctive. Those are the clues that you can use to spot a subjunctive, but usually the form of the word, the morphology of it, will give you the clues that you need to work out that it's a subjunctive. Think then about the different ways that the subjunctive is used, and that should help you gain insight into how that verse is translated and what the writer was trying to convey in the way that they put it together and their choice of the grammar. Think about why the subjunctive was used as well. Why wasn't it expressed? For example, if it's exhortative, why wasn't it expressed as an imperative? Or why wasn't it expressed using an indicative? Or possibly an infinitive? Think about why the writer did that and what it means to have done that. Think about what tense they use. Think about what voice they're using. These all convey important meanings. So here is the table with all of those. Remember that for the indicative mood, we added an epsilon for the past tenses. That doesn't apply in other moods. So the aorist simply adds a sigma. Second aorists, the stem will change as well. We will come back over the following weeks to practice these and to look at the aorist, and the perfect, and the other voices as well. Let's have a little think about some examples. So I've picked one out here from Mark 14:14. Here we see a subjunctive used, and hopu is going to be our trigger word in this case, and the verb to eat. The verse is in English, "Where is the guest room of me," this is Jesus speaking, "that I might eat the Passover with my disciples," the Passover meal. So in Greek that's "Pou estin to kataluma mu, hopu to pascha meta ton methaton mu phago." So phago has remained as phago in this case. I eat is being used with the subjunctive to say, in order that I might eat with my disciples. And hopu has been used in this case to lead us into this subordinating clause. We can see subjunctives also posing questions. Here we have, "And the Lord said," hear what the unrighteous judge says, and "Will not God give justice to his elect, who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long over them?" So here in Luke 18, start out with the word accusata is an imperative. Hear or listen. We're going to come on to imperatives. Then T is an indefinite pronoun. We've just been doing pronouns. What the judge unrighteous says. So the genitive has been used here, a bit like an adjective in this case. We'll also come to doing that when we talk further about genitives. But here an appositional phrase has been used. The unrighteous judge says, "Hot de theos u me poiese ten ekdikesin ton eklekton autou." So hot and de are here introducing this subordinating clause. That's quite common. I didn't put de on the list earlier because de is used in other contexts as well. So you will see that word used quite a lot. Sometimes it's and, sometimes it's better to translate it as but. Therefore, there are various ways to translate it, depends on the context. But de is not especially a word that goes only with the subjunctive. You will see it introducing the subjunctive, and that is the conjunction that's been used in this case. Then we have the double negative u and may used. They are both adversatives. Now in English that would reverse the meaning to put a double negative. In Greek it's just used to give emphasis. So remember that the subjunctive is always somewhat mild. Here is a linguistic tool that the writer has used to put that a little bit more strongly. And then poiese is a subjunctive, an aorist in this case because it's once off, and God shall not do the avenging of the elect, eklek tone, pretty close to our English word. To those crying out, tone, bo'on tone, alto, hemeras kai nuktos, through the day and the night. So, poiese, here I've highlighted, is a subjunctive. Which type is it? Well, here we have an independent clause, and it is a hypothetical question. And will not God do this? So we have the unrighteous judge being mentioned, and saying, if the unrighteous judge says that, how much more will God? And then give justice to those who cry out to him. So Jesus is making the point that if even an unjust judge will eventually give in, how much more will God, who is perfect, hear the cries of those calling out to him all day and all night? So it's a hypothetical question that's being posed. How much more will God do this than this bad judge who isn't a good guy? We'll consider this example a little bit further on in Luke 18. Amen, lego humin, hos an me dexetai ten basilean tu theu, hos paideon, u me aselse, altain. Here the particle, introduces a subjunctive clause, so it's a dependent clause here. So the entering of the kingdom is dependent on the receiving of it like a child. So we must be childlike in our humility towards God in order to receive. Or as it says here, we will not receive if we do not approach with childlike humility and openness. So u and may both here are negative. So equally, whilst entering the kingdom is dependent on receiving it with a childlike humility, we can say also that not entering it is a result of not receiving it like a child. The else is prohibitive here, and is with the adversative here, the double adversative for extra emphasis. Sometimes these statements are quite similar to English constructions and word orders, so you will see a pretty literal translation being similar to the one that focuses on a more dynamic equivalences, what might be phrased a bit differently. But the Greek is a little bit more definite and specific in its equivalent words, and has the ability to specify voice much more clearly. In this example, the voice being middle in the receiving and active for the entering. Erchomai is usually in the middle, it's always in the middle in the present tense, but when we see it in the past tenses it becomes active. As we've seen before, sometimes deponent verbs that are middle voice only become active in the past tense. We've been doing pronouns recently, so let's just highlight those. We have the personal pronoun, humin, like in the Lord's Prayer, to you. And we have the relative pronoun, which is nominative masculine, singular here, hos. You will quite often see a relative pronoun used in this way alongside the subordinating clause and the subjunctive. Lastly, on the bottom line, autein, another personal pronoun. This is feminine, grammatically feminine. It's referring to the third person singular it, and that is, it is the kingdom, which is a feminine word, basilean, so the personal pronoun is also feminine and singular. Tain, basilean, and autein. Let's just take a look at the root words. Dexatai came from decomai, so because it's an aorist, we're adding the sigma, and the sigma gets added in on a chi, the k sound. So you may remember when right back early on we talked about what happens when we added a sigma to k is going to become a ksai, so decomai becomes dex, and then atai gives the inflection for third person singular. Ace elthe is a compound word from ace, meaning in or into, and erkomai, to go, so it means to go into, ace erkomai, and that is a second aorist, so we see the stem has changed significantly. The ace bit stays the same, but erkomai has become elthe with its inflection for third person singular as well. So a change in the stem from erko to elf. Noting the eta with an iota on it is another good sign of the subjunctive. That is, it's often a way to spot the subjunctive. However, dexatai here didn't need one because of what there was in the stem and what we're actually adding to. So you won't always see that iota subscript, but it is pretty common in the subjunctive. In Matthew 8 verse 8, let's look at a subjunctive of purpose and result. Starts out with apokrithes de. This is very common in the Bible. Apokrithes is a passive participle, answering, and then it's often answering him or answering however in this case. Ho hekatontarkos Fa, the centurion, said, Kuri, buk emi ikanos hinamu hupotein stegen eis elthes. Lord, I am not worthy that you would come under my roof. Alamonon logo, but only say the word, kai iathesetai hopaismu, and my servant will be healed. At the end there, another personal pronoun, mu, is the last word, genitive, first person singular. In this verse we have hina, because it's a purpose and result subjunctive, and then it leads to elthes, that word again, but this time second person singular. So hina mu hupo tein stegen eis elthes. I'm not worthy that you would come under my roof, but if you only speak the word, my servant will be healed. So that's the purpose and result there of what is happening. So here you see the one clause and then the following subordinating clause expressing a purpose, a result, an outcome. And remember, whenever that happens, we will see it introduced with hina. There's pretty much no rule in Greek that is absolutely 100% perfect. There's nearly always an exception to any rule that I tell you, but I'm pretty sure that all or nearly all of the purpose and result subjunctives are introduced by hina. I know there are some examples of subjunctives without particles or conjunctions. They're used on their own, but I'm not sure that a purpose or result one is. If you find one, then do let me know. But generally speaking, if you spot hinner in there, you know a subjunctive is going to be used, and you know that it's going to be a purpose and result one. And examples of the hortatory subjunctive, and moving towards the end here, the hortatory or exhortative subjunctive is like a mild imperative, encouraging people to do something rather than commanding. Here are some examples. I got these from ntgreek.net, which is a really handy site for learning. There's practice examples there, there's flashcards, there's various explanations of things. Do check that out. It's a really good one. Remember that the exhortative subjunctive is going to be seen only as a first person plural. The first example is John 11 verse 7. Epeita meta tuto lege tois methetais, agomen eis tein Judean palin. Then after this he says to his disciples, let's us go into Judea again. So it's not a command to do it, it's let's go and do it. Second example is from John 14:31. Egeireste, that is an imperative. Arise. Agomen entuthen, let's depart from here. So a mild exhortation there to depart. And the last example is one with a negative from Galatians 5:26. We start out with may, and adversative, let us not become vainglorious. Ginometha, in this case a middle voice subjunctive has been used, and kenodoxoi has been translated as vainglorious. Not a common word these days. The 7 deadly sins used to be 8 deadly sins, and vainglory was the additional one. It's kind of got dropped. In more modern Christian parlance, it's kind of a mixture of sort of pride and vanity in oneself, seeing glory through vanity in ourselves. Perhaps narcissism is another word, probably a Latin word that we could use to in place of vainglorious, but kenodoxoi. That's a good translation. It's an old word, but it's kind of a good translation of kenodoxoi. Just to mention also, we have these negative particles or adversatives being used, may and oo. May tends to be used to talk about ideas, and oo about facts. These are often used for introducing questions or statements about these ideas and facts. These are often also leading questions designed to coach the one replying, the respondent, to an agreed point of reason. May will likely be used where a negative answer is expected, and oo where a positive answer is expected. They can, however, both be used for added emphasis. Thanking you guys for coming along and listening to this lesson. Thank you for listening to the end. I mentioned ntgreek.net. If you want to check out that website, it's lesson 29 for the subjunctives. You can find out a bit more there. You can do some practice questions and exercises and flashcards, and look at other chapters to find out more as well. That's a great site by a guy called Jeremy Duff, whose book I used when I was learning Greek, and it's a really excellent place for you to learn more if you would like to. Thank you for coming along. You'll see coming up on the screen the suggestions for the next video. There's a practice video, and then there's the next topic video. Also, do click subscribe if you'd like to hear the latest updates from this channel when new videos are uploaded. And if you like this video, then do click like. That helps us to get more views on these videos, more navigations to it. Thanks for coming along. I pray that God will bless you in your endeavours as you continue to learn about Him through His Word. Goodbye. God bless.